Hi everybody, Real Estate with a Twist. Richard Trascoma, your local realtor for E.R.A. Grizzard if you're in Lake County or mid-Florida. Give me a call. That's what I do to pay for all this so I can teach you guys. It's not easy. Today happens to be my birthday, so I'm running out of time before my wife tells me that we got to get the heck out of here. We're going over to Claremont to go to the Claremont Brewery, I think it is, and have a little food and enjoy happy hour over there. But before that, it's time for the cocktail of the week, which is actually this is a very strange cocktail and very unusual. I would almost say that this is one of those ones that nobody would know or nobody be able to guess, and actually, in all honesty, one that I have never made until today. I don't see it being something very common, although it is the only one. Well, let's start out with why it's so unusual. It's an old cocktail. It goes back to the early 1800s, early to mid 1800s. So for that reason, it's very old. But what makes this cocktail actually stand out amongst all the other high-selling cocktails in the world that have been popular is that it doesn't have a base liquor. It doesn't have a whiskey. It doesn't have a gin. It doesn't have any of that. It actually only uses sherry. I know you probably think, man, I haven't heard of that since my grandparents were drinking it around the table. And I probably had to grab the right one. So it grabs the sherry. There's a few different kinds you can use, but mostly you'll see the Fina referenced in any of the historic stuff. So a sherry, that's a Fino. And then they used vermouth, dry and sweet, depending on the recipe, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then bitters were introduced as well. Orange and Angostura bitters were introduced. So what makes this one unusual is it doesn't have that base liqueur. And for that same reason, it stands, if you look at like the top 100 or 150 cocktails of all time, this one actually would show up on there. And I would going to go out on a limb and say it's probably the only sherry-based cocktail to be on that list, which makes it a strange sort of thing. So if you walk into a bar and ask for this, you might actually stump the bartender. I would just look at you like, why? But for that reason, today we're gonna make a cocktail called the Bamboo, or just the Bamboo. So a lot of people, the name goes back and forth. A lot of people thought there was a song that came out in 1902 called like Under the Bamboo Tree. A lot of people assumed that that was it, but it turns out that we can go back a little farther, that somewhere in the late to mid 1800s, this thing was referred to. So the song couldn't have done it because it was still many years from coming out. The earliest reference to this drink is to some Englishman who was traveling around in New York, and actually it made it out to Kansas City, but no one ever said his name, just an Englishman that had this recipe. And the very early thing, it just said it was 3 parts sherry and 1 part vermouth. And that was sort of the recipe for the Bamboo. But there was a bartender who made his fame. He was a German bartender, Eppinger, in San Francisco, a very famous bartender at the time, came up with many of his own cocktails. And although some people attributed this cocktail to him, the truth is I think we can attribute the fact that he is the one that made it popular. So in 1886, there are a few written references to this cocktail with some unknown Englishmen. And then after that, most of the references in most of the journals for recipes for drinks and bar drinks reference Eppinger as the guy that probably did it. So that guy sort of has a weird story, which is actually mid-1800s, about the time that he is laying this stuff out in San Francisco and making this drink very popular. Yokohama, Japan, the other side of the world, or a good distance towards the other side of the world, some U.S. sailors are over there, and they decide that they want to bring a little bit of America and stuff over there, and so they move him all the way to Yokohama, Japan, where he works in the Grand Hotel, coming up and serving drinks over there to try and sort of Americanize Japan. And he would die a few years later over there after continuing to do that till the end of his life. So the Bamboo history goes back to the mid-1800s. The recipes have changed slightly to make it better, obviously, as we've gotten a little bit more advanced. The recipes have changed. So I told you originally the original recipe was just 2 parts sherry, 1 part vermouth, and that was it. What happened shortly after there was 2 parts sherry, 1 part vermouth, and a dash of orange bitters. But what we're going to do is make what you would probably expect to get in a modern day bar if you ordered a Bamboo. So you can stir this, you can shake it if you want. It should be stirred because everything we're going to put in here is an alcohol-based sort of thing. So it should be stirred normally, but you can shake it if you want. So the recipe we're going to use today is just 1.5 parts of sherry. And then we're going to do a mix. If you like dry, you can change this up, or if you like sweet, you can change this up. But we're going to go with a middle of the road today. So 1.5 ounces of your sherry, the Fino preferably. You don't want it too dry. And then we're going to do a little mix here. So if you're a dry person, you can go stick with the dry vermouth or lower the sweet. And you can see if you like sweet, you can go ahead and change that. you're going to want to put 3/4 of an ounce of those in here. So 3/4 of an ounce of each is what we're going to go for today. So 3/4 of the dry, 3/4 of the sweet. You want to use a little bit nicer of the vermouths if you have them for this, because obviously they affect the flavor a lot in this cocktail. And that's really it. You will see some people that put a little bit of sugar in there maybe, instead of maybe a sweet vermouth or something like that, but I don't think it needs that. It stands kind of on its own. We're gonna also, a modern day one, you might not see bitters. It would have told you in the old original recipes to put 2 dashes of orange in there. We'll do a couple drops of orange, and it would have said to put a couple drops of the Angostura. So what we'll try and do is just hit it with 1 little drop to give it a something, since we're making our own recipe as it goes. So we're kind of coming up with our own modern recipe, and that's what you'll probably get in a bar nowadays. You want to make it obviously cold if you're shaking it. It doesn't matter if you're shaking or stirring, make sure it's cold. Actually, we'll throw a little bit more ice in here. The cocktail is normally served in a coupe glass. You can serve it in a martini glass if that's what you got, but make sure you stir that, get it nice and cold, nice and cold. I better make sure I've got a strainer before I finish this up here. Apparently I'm gonna go old school strainer. So make sure you get that nice and cold, nice and cold, nice and cold. The bamboo, like I said, it's actually one of the cocktails that still shows up on modern day things. I'm gonna have to go the old fashioned way here. Modern day recipes. So if you ask for it in a nicer place, don't be surprised if the bartender knows what it is. Most people will probably have to Google it. Lord knows I would have. Decorating it and flavoring it, you want to use a lemon twist. You want to make sure that you actually express squeeze it, let a little bit of that lemon zest come out of there. You can twist it if you want and sit it on the side of the glass, or you can drop it in, whatever you're comfortable with. And that, my friends, is a very unusual cocktail going back to the mid-1800s, the bamboo. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next week.